Hello, everybody. This is Empowering Democracy. It's another Dump the Corruption show. I'm your host, Joe Firestone. And tonight I want to talk about dark money. Yeah, dark money. Hmm. So I want to turn to Open Secrets for facts about dark money. Give me a moment. I want to make sure I've shared this on Facebook. Yep. Uh, mm. Okay, sorry for the interruption. I just had Chrome crash on me, and so I had to go out of Chrome and then go in again. But I am here now. And now I want to share what Open Secrets has to say about dark money. So here we are. I think you should be seeing that. Yes, there it is. So Open Secrets has this to say: dark money groups spend millions to shape our elections without revealing where their money comes from. Learn more about their outside influence below. Okay, let's go to Dark Money Basics. Okay, Bonnie, I'm getting noise from your machines.
I'm trying to turn the sound down.
Okay, let me share the Dark Money page. Here we are. Okay, so Open Secrets gets right down to basics. What is dark money? Quote, dark money refers to spending meant to influence political outcomes, where the source of the money is not disclosed. Here's how dark money makes its way into elections. Politically active nonprofits, such as 501c4s, are generally under no legal obligation to disclose their donors, even if they spend to influence elections. When they choose not to reveal their sources of funding, they are considered dark money groups. So there's your definition. Opaque nonprofits and shell companies may give unlimited amounts of money to super PACs, while super PACs are legally required to disclose their donors. Some of these groups are effectively dark money outlets when the bulk of their funding cannot be traced back to the original donors. So, what you've got here is a system, is a relationship between nonprofits and shell companies, okay, and the super PACs, because the nonprofits and shell companies serve as intermediaries between the donors and the super PACs, while the super PACs must disclose all contributions of $200 K and over. Okay, the disclosure is limited to the nonprofits and shell companies. In other words, they're the donors, they're recorded as the donors, but since they don't have to disclose who their donors are, there's no transparency. The public doesn't get to see who the real donors are giving these huge amounts of money to the super PACs. We see this in particular with organizations such as AIPAC, um, 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 and the the Democracy Project, which is a super PAC, okay, of AIPAC. There are nonprofits and shell companies that can give huge contributions to super PACs such as the UDP, and there's no way to find out who gave money to the nonprofits, okay, and the shell companies, and how much they gave. Dark money groups have spent roughly $1 billion, mainly on television and online ads and mailers, to influence elections in the decade since the 2010 Citizens United versus FEC Supreme Court ruling, that gave rise to politically active nonprofits. Citizens who are barraged with political messages paid for with money from undisclosed sources may not be able to consider the credibility and possible motives of the wealthy corporate or individual funders behind those messages, which is why it's best for us, the voters, to view the money flowing through the super PACs as basically dark money. Of course, the super PACs informally are probably quite well aware of who the source of this money is, because that can be informally revealed, even though it isn't revealed or disclosed, to the public. So it's quite possible that the super PACs know exactly what the source of this money is, and the super PACs may have even been created as vehicles for this dark money to get into politics. And it can be huge money, because unlimited amounts of money can be funneled through the super PACs. The super PACs can raise as much money as they want to raise. All they have to disclose is the nonprofit 501c4s, and the shell companies. They don't have to disclose. In some cases, they may not even be able to disclose who the original source of the huge quantities of money they're getting is. So there's an infographic here. If we click on the infographic, I don't know if you can see it right now. Well, I guess I'm not going to go there, because I'd have to shift again to what you're looking at, but I'll just sort of summarize the infographic for you. The last three presidential elections have seen dramatic growth in reported dark money spending. 2004, that spending was estimated at $5.9 million. In 2000, it was estimated at $102.4 million. 2012, it was estimated at $308.7 million. And reported dark money spending in the first year of the 2016 presidential election was 10 times more than it was at that point in 2012. And of course, current estimates are that dark money donations are over $1 billion. So let us go back to, let's see, what am I showing now? Oh, I'm actually showing that. But I do want to shift over to back to the previous tab. So the next section is on types of election spending. Political jargon can get confusing. What you need to know about spending to influence elections is that there are two main types. Hard money, traditional political spending, this is. With this kind of spending, donors must be disclosed. Contribution limits apply, and organizations are allowed to coordinate their efforts to help to elect a candidate. This is not dark money. These groups include candidate committees, political parties, and traditional political action committees, or PACs. Then there's soft money. That is outside political spending. Outside spending, sometimes referred to as independent or non-coordinated spending, refers to political spending made by organizations and individuals other than the candidate campaigns themselves. All outside groups that aren't political parties, except for a few traditional PACs that make independent expenditures, are allowed to accept unlimited sums of money from individuals, corporations, or unions. With these donations, groups may engage in a number of direct political activities, including buying advertising that advocates for or against a candidate, going door to door, or running phone banks. However, these organizations are not allowed to coordinate their spending with political candidates or parties. While some outside groups, like super PACs, are required to disclose their donors, others are not. These non disclosing organizations are referred to as dark money groups. There's another definition of dark money groups. As the chart below illustrates, dark money groups are growing in size, scope, and share of election spending with each election cycle. This graph just below, which I hope you are seeing now. Yes, you are seeing it now. Graph of outside spending by non-disclosing groups, excluding party committees. And there it is, showing a peak in 2012. This is showing dark money contributions decreasing, so that it was down to 147.73 million in 2018, 118.97 million in 2020, and only 37.62 million in 2022. What accounts for this decline in dark money spending? There is D here. I am joined by D. Pierce, the host of Around the World with D and Friends.
Yes, I'm happy to be here. How you doing, Joe?
I am doing fine, D. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine, thank you.
How is the conclusion of your stream after I had to leave?
It's just I don't even know if I can find the words because we went to then, the Palestine Chronicle with the attack on Al-Aqsa Mosque, and you're seeing the video, and there was videos then going to attacks today that are going on. And then you go from the fact of them wanting the normalization and not thinking about the Palestinians. And
so the Palestinians would be left out of normalization entirely because, of course, it would be a condition of the normalization that the Israelis could go right on killing Palestinians at will, and nobody would object, right?
It's just that's the one thing so far is what Saudi has been objecting to, and they want the recognition of the Palestinians, but Israel's like, they'll go along with the nuclear, not the Palestinian.
I can well understand that. Okay, back to dark money. We're into dark money here, talking about types of dark money spending. Whenever money is spent in a political election with the purpose of influencing a decision of a voter, and the source of the money is not disclosed, it is dark money. Common types of
Mhm.
organizations that can spend in elections while shielding the sources of their money are outlined in greater detail below. There are political nonprofits. Nonprofit tax-exempt groups organized under Section 501c of the Internal Revenue Code may engage in varying amounts of political activity because they are not technically political organizations. They're generally not required to disclose their donors to the public. These groups, like super PACs, cannot coordinate spending with political parties or candidates, and therefore are allowed to raise unlimited sums of money from individual organizations and corporations, which means that virtually unlimited amounts of dark money can be raised as long as it's going through these nonprofits, tax exempt groups. Moving on to types of 501c organizations, there are a number of types of 501c organizations with different structures, uses, and capabilities. None of these organizations are required to publicly disclose the identity of their donors or sources of money, though some disclose funding sources voluntarily. First, there are 501c3 groups. These organizations operate for religious, charitable, scientific, or educational purposes. These groups are not supposed to engage in any political activities, though some voter registration activities are permitted. Donations to these organizations are tax deductible. Groups you may know: NAACP, Center for American Progress, the Heritage Foundation, and Open Secrets. Then there's the 501c4 groups, often referred to as social welfare organizations, quote unquote. These nonprofits are the most common kind of dark money group. They may engage in political activities as long as these activities do not become their primary purpose. The IRS has never defined what primary means or how a percentage should be calculated, so the current de facto rule is 49.9% of overall expenditures. This is a limit that some groups have found easy to circumvent. Donations to these groups are not tax deductible. Some groups you may know: National Rifle Association, Planned Parenthood, also Majority Forward, and One Nation. Then there are 501c5 groups. These are labor and agricultural groups and may engage in political activities as long as they adhere to the same general limits as 501c4 organizations. They're generally funded by dues from union employees. Donations to these groups are not tax deductible. Groups you may know include Service Employees International Union, the SEIU, the American Federation of Labor and Congress of Industrial Organizations, AFL-CIO, and American Federation of State, County, and also the Municipal Employees. That's also known as AFSCME, AFSCME, a real tongue twister. 501c6 organizations. These are business leagues, chambers of commerce, real estate boards, and trade associations, which may engage in political activity as long as they adhere to the same general limits as 501c4 groups. Donations to these groups are not tax deductible. Groups you may know: the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, the American Bankers Association, the National Association of Realtors. So all these groups can make donations to super PACs. They can even start super PACs, okay, of their own. And it would not be necessary for the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, the American Bankers Association, and so on, okay, or the unions to disclose the original source, okay, of donations. For some reason, 2012 was a peak for dark money. It's been declining ever since. There was a rise after 2012. There was a rise in 2016, but then it began to decline again. And in 2022, it was at $24.7 million.
Mhm.
This is based on data released daily by the FEC. The chart was last updated on August 30th, 2023. The green graphic up there is social welfare organizations, 501c4s. The red line, okay, is unions. Okay, notice how unions very much go low often. Especially compared to trade associations, and especially compared to the social welfare groups. Okay, the next section is on super PACs. Super PACs, technically known as independent expenditure committees. Super PACs may raise and spend an unlimited amount of money and accept contributions from companies, nonprofits, unions, and individuals. Since super PACs cannot give money directly to candidates, they're exempt from the limits on fundraising and spending that the regular PACs must abide by. Despite the inaccurate portrayal of them in the media, super PACs must identify all their donors to the FEC and thereby to the public. They must do so on a monthly or semi-annual basis in non-federal election years and monthly in the year of an election. In that sense, super PACs are quite transparent, except when the donor is a shell corporation or a nonprofit that doesn't disclose its donors. So-called pop-up super PACs, formed shortly before an election, may game disclosure deadlines, enabling them to spend unlimited sums influencing races without disclosing their funding sources until after their voters go to the polls. While super PACs are not allowed to coordinate any of their independent expenditures with a candidate's campaign, many single candidate super PACs are run by individuals who are personally close to a candidate or formally associated with the campaign. Then there are the hybrid PACs, also called carry committees. Hybrid PAC has the ability to operate both as a traditional PAC, contributing funds to a candidate's committee, and as a super PAC that makes independent expenditures. To do so, these committees must have a separate bank account for each purpose. Okay, the committee may collect unlimited contributions from almost any source for its independent expenditure account, but may not use those funds for its traditional PAC contributions. And there are LLCs, specifically limited liability companies, and shell companies. They perform a number of necessary business functions, However, their unique structure may easily be abused or used in order to hide less than above board activity. In politics, LLCs are sometimes established to help disguise the identity of a donor or a source of money spent on behalf of a political candidate. LLCs are governed by state law, but generally minimal information is necessary to file the required articles of incorporation in states such as Delaware, New Mexico, Nevada, and Wyoming. LLCs may be incorporated without even disclosing the names of members or managers. This lack of accountability and transparency have helped disguise the source of millions of dollars in political spending. Shell companies make major contributions to super PACs each election cycle, leaving voters in the dark, while the recipient often knows the donor's true identity. Feel free to distribute or cite this material, but please credit the Open Secrets for permission to reprint for commercial uses, such as textbooks. Contact Open Secrets info@crp.org. Okay. So those are the organizations that constitute the system that produces dark money contributions and dark money spending. So let's go back and let's take a look at how dark money groups work. Let me make sure this took. Yes. Dark money process. Now, this is an old page. It was last updated in June of 2015. So that may be relevant. Many laws govern what 50C organization or dark money group can do with its money and what it is required to report. While some expenditures, such as explicit political spending, must be publicly disclosed, many other expenditures remain off the radar screen. Most of what we know about spending by dark money groups, spending is gathered from their annual IRS 990 forms. They must file these forms, including their major vendors and the organizations to which they give grants. As the example below illustrates, groups often submit only vague descriptions of their outlays to vendors, such as media services or consulting phone programs, quote unquote. But D, I'm getting a bit of an echo on this. Could you possibly be the source?
I don't know. Myself.
Okay. They're not obligated to say what the money purchased with any specificity. These organizations can spend money on direct political advocacy, but that cannot be their primary purpose, which is usually determined by how much the group spent on politics as a proportion of their overall expenditures. Disclosure requirements mandate that 501c groups report direct political expenditures to the Federal Election Committee, but expenses earmarked as educational or membership building are considered part of the organization's primary purpose, and most of the time need not be detailed. So, for example, expenses that may be directed towards, let's say, but telling people about uh, how the government financing system operates, and that insists that the only source, okay, of government money is taxing and spending, might be earmarked, okay, as educational, and they could spend really huge amounts of money. So organizations such as the Peterson Foundation can spend literally millions each year telling the public that there is no government money, that it all comes from taxing the private sector or borrowing from the private sector, and millions of dollars spent on that message would be earmarked, okay, as educational. Uh, Even though it's very political, shapes political attitudes very directly, supports the whole idea of talking about fiscal responsibility as if the federal government is limited in its capacity to create money. And they can spend this kind of money all day long, okay, in the millions, and it's chalked up as being in line with their educational purposes and does not therefore detract on their political advocacy for this kind of view of how federal money is actually created. And then they can spend another 49.9% of their total output on direct support for political candidates or direct support for political campaigns or direct support for political issues. So the point is, there's very little regulation of what they actually can spend. It's very easy for them to get around their so-called constraints. And if all else fails, they can contribute to super PACs. And the super PACs don't have to disclose that these nonprofits contributed dollars to them. To help bring some clarity to this murky landscape, Open Secrets is providing a few breakdowns here of the more than 1,500 annual Form 990 filings for more than 400 organizations we track. Keep in mind, there is no way to systematically track all political spending by 501c organizations. Groups often use loopholes in the FEC regulations to buy ads, okay, mailers, and in particular to make large expenditures for ad production and TV airtime without reporting it as such. That's because as long as their ads don't contain an explicit call to vote for or against a candidate, and they air more than 30 days before a primary and 60 days before a general election, there's no FEC requirement for that spending to be reported. Open Secrets regularly reveals this additional activity, but there is no component in the overall data that can be used to track it consistently and uniformly across the board. For this reason, the percentages reported here from many of the groups are conservative because a significant portion of the largest group's activities takes place outside the FEC's reporting windows. The chart below allows you to explore this spending. The data can be sorted by rank, organization, end date, total expenditures, political spending reported by a group to the IRS. Also, political spending reported by a group to the FEC and the percentage of FEC reported political spending with donors disclosed. And we have this graphic which seems to stop at 12/31/2014 for some reason. But you can see from the graphic that millions and millions of dollars are spent by specific groups. For example, Crossroads GPS, okay, that's a Democratic group. Spent a total of $65,851,939 in 2014. And the IRS political spending was 39.5%. The FEC political spending was 39.5%. Political spending with recipients was 39.5%. But the IRS political spending was $25,981,100. There are different figures for different years, like Crossroads GPS in 2013 spent $4,093,650. So it was far less. In 2012, it was far more, $188,897,560 total expenditures, and political spending was $74,510,334. That's just one group. This goes through a number of groups. There are 1,622 entries, and for each one, it shows there's data on the organization, the end date, the expenditures, total expenditures, IRS political spending, the FEC political spending, FEC political spending with recipients, and IRS political spending. In other words, what's classified as political spending by the IRS. Okay, so there's data also on educational spending. In order to avoid having their exempt status revoked or denied by the IRS, politically active nonprofits are very careful to keep the political spending they report to the agency well below the agency's de facto limit of 49% of their total expenditures. Many groups will exploit IRS loopholes by describing tangential political activities as educational or as membership building in order to further their political reach. In many cases, groups will spend considerable sums of money on advertising similar to the commercial above and classify this spending as educational because while it mentions a candidate's name, it does not directly advocate for the election or defeat of a candidate. Groups will only classify advertising that explicitly calls for viewers to vote for or against a candidate as political spending, and the IRS lets them get away with that. By the way, that's not in the law. In other words, what counts as political spending and what does not has been determined by executive order over a period of years. it is not, a function of the laws. This could be changed by a new president who would issue new executive orders. The president who cleared the way for nonprofit political spending, by the way, was actually Dwight Eisenhower in 1958. He liberalized the idea of what nonprofits could spend on by introducing the notion that their primary spending activities had to be for educational purposes, but that they could do other spending, including political spending. And since also primary was never defined, this also meant that a practice was developed by the IRS to set a de facto limit of 49.9%. But this all started back in 1958 with Dwight Eisenhower. So you can thank him for all the nonprofit spending that we see from 501c groups. In 2014, Americans for Prosperity, which is sort of a Republican-oriented group, ran more than 33,000 educational ads. Those advertisements all mentioned candidates in contentious Senate races, but never advocated for the direct election or defeat of the candidates. Once the FAC's reporting window opened, the AFP spent millions more on ads that explicitly called on voters not to vote for the same candidates mentioned in the educational ads. Then there's political grant making. Another way they get around spending too much on politics is by making large grants to like-minded groups. This grant expenditure is considered part of the organization's primary purpose budget. These grants can serve two purposes. The grant recipient can then spend a portion of the donor's money on political advocacy. The recipient organization's overall budget grows larger, allowing it to spend more money on political activity. The infographic below shows an example of how $10 million can legally be passed around a network of organizations to inflate budgets and allow the organizations to ultimately spend the entire $10 million on political advocacy. And here's an infographic on that. Click the image to view the full infographic. And there it is. This again covers the presidential elections going from 2004 to 2012. I guess it's the same infographic we saw before, so I don't have to see it again. There's a listing here of their top grant recipients. These are the top political nonprofits and their affiliates that have received grants from 501c organizations that Open Secrets has been able to identify by combing through 990 reports and FEC disclosures. Other groups may have pulled in more money, but because the donors were individuals, corporations, or other entities, their identities remain a mystery. So if Sheldon Adelson made a contribution through a nonprofit, he could have made a contribution of $25 million, and that would remain a mystery. Corner Table LLC, a center to protect patient rights. received a total of $129 million in 2011. The American Future Fund, $85 million. Energy Foundation, $84 million. 60 Plus Association, $43 million. So you see, there are huge amounts of money that can be granted to the top of the pyramid of nonprofits. Those were the top 10 of 352 such entries. So there's a wealth of data there that we don't have the time to explore, okay, in this program. Let's now look at some of the top election spenders. This gives you some of the milestones, basically freeing up how dark money groups can give to elections. In 2022, top election spenders were, in terms of dark money groups, National Association of Realtors, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. We vote, we win. To give you the scale, the top contributions were from National Association of Realtors, $2.8 million. Chamber of Commerce, $1.8 million. We vote, we win, $1.7 million. Ohio Organizing Campaign, $1.6 million, that's $1.7 million approximately. And the Black Progressive Action Coalition, $1.4 million. Vote Vets, $1.4 million. Americans for Constitutional Liberty, $1.3 million. Opportunity for All Action Fund, $1 million. So those were some of the top contributors. There were 79 entries in this particular data table. Those were just the top ones. Let's look at the top donors for a minute. Who are the top dark money donors? This was in the period from 2008 to 2014. Donors to politically active nonprofits and affiliates and pass-throughs. Freedom Partners, Chamber of Commerce, $324 million between November 2011, December 2014. Center to Protect Patient Rights, $169,149,000, January 2009 to December 2012. I'll just name some of the other organizations. Crossroads GPS, Sea Change Foundation, Climate Works, TCA Trust, the Atlantic Advocacy Funds, Then there's Americans for Job Security, the Advocacy Fund, the Wellspring Committee. Those were the top 10. Even the last one had donated between February 2008 and December 2015, $24,167,552. There are 179 of these entries. In which elections is dark money spent? Some election contests attract a great deal of outside spending as various interests attempt to help or harm candidates. Others receive far less. Over the last few election cycles, the influence of outside groups such as 501c4 social welfare organizations and 501c6 trade associations has grown significantly. Let's see if this is, I'm not sure what dates this page, is relevant for. These organizations are generally referred to as dark money groups because they do not have to disclose where they got their money, though some do voluntarily. So we heard about this particular thing before. Races that attract the most dark money. In 2022, the Ohio Senate race, that was the race between J.D. Vance and I forget the name of the Ohio congressman who ran against him. He was a centrist Democrat. Very pro-labor, very senior. He was very senior, in the House, a key member of the House committee, tried to step up to the Senate. He lost to J.D. Vance. The Wisconsin Senate race was also a very important race, which a lot of money was spent by dark money groups. The Pennsylvania Senate race was another very important race. In a lot of these races, the disclosed money was spent actually for Democrats. More money was spent for Democrats than for Republicans in many of these races, which is perhaps a little bit of a surprise. In the Georgia Senate race, more money was spent in favor of the Republicans, but more money was spent against the Republicans. Still, the net gain in that race, in terms of dark money, was for the Republicans. In the North Carolina Senate race, $213,217 was spent for Republicans. $26,000 was against, the Democrats. This amount of money doesn't add up to $893,123, so something is missing here. Something is missing in this table. that we are not able to see. The Illinois District 3 race, 790,000 was spent. $678,000 was spent for Democrats. $112,000 was spent against them. No money was spent either for or against any of the Republicans. That's rather strange. But I won't go into the particulars of those races here. Here's a table of candidates who got the most dark money. Yeah, there's the name of the Democrat. I was thinking of Tim Ryan, who ran for the Senate, but was a very important, relatively conservative Democrat, okay, in the House. He got $1,214,000 in dark money. And there was about $7,800 in dark money spent against him. And there was dark money in the race from Wisconsin Senate. The dark money was predominantly against the Republican Ron Johnson, $828,000 against him, $25,000 for him, zero for the Democrats in both the for and against the category there. Okay, Ted Budd in North Carolina, $213,000 for the Republicans for Ted Budd, and $5,831 against him. One of the standing races was the Pennsylvania Senate race. John Fetterman, $727,042 in dark money for John Fetterman. Only $2,080 against John Fetterman. There are no comparable figures that were discovered for Oz in that race, for Mehmet Oz. So I'm not going to go through all these because we've just about run out of time. There's another category here called Explore the Records. This is a nonprofit data search category. You can search organizations by name or EIN. You can look, at all the organizations, that they have data. Only problem is this page was last updated in June 2015. Okay, this allows you to sift through Form 990 filing data. But since it ends in 2015, its usefulness, is limited as of now. So I'm going to stop sharing now. Obviously, dark money is a very, very important category. We've seen a decline in its use, in recent years, based on some of the statistics we've examined here. But its use can come back, at any time. Probably the dark money people have found some easier ways to do it. than going through the nonprofits, because we know huge amounts of money was spent in all of these campaigns. The statistics I just showed for John Fetterman were just a drop in the bucket compared to what Fetterman was able to raise from super PACs. We covered that before, and it was just a drop in the bucket. He got support, super PAC support, in the tens of millions of dollars. It was very, very big. So I'm going to let things go. Okay. On that note, have you anything to add, Dee? Okay. Or any reaction?
Very well showing us the dark money and the money and just, this whole manipulation is, you figure they've got their lawyers and all these corporate lawyers putting these things together, how they can manipulate money.
Uh, from Open Secrets itself, it's obvious that there are loopholes in the campaign financing laws that you can drive huge trucks through. And over a period of time, that, is what has happened, even not counting, the decisions of the Supreme Court, which have been so devastating, in terms of allowing money in. That's why I've taken the approach in terms of Dump the Corruption of trying not to deal with technicalities, but trying instead just to emphasize all the possible sources of money and to say to people, if anybody running takes money from any of these particular sources, the right thing to do is to vote against them. And I've always emphasized the greater importance of voting against people than voting for people. In other words, my approach is you disqualify anyone who's taking the big money, whoever they are, whatever their other qualifications. If they're taking the big money, they're bought by the big money, in some way. So you
Right,
have
and
to
this is
vote
why
against them, and then who you
exactly.
vote for is determined by who's left.
And
In
that's
other
the clear
words,
reason why we don't have health care,
yeah,
why we don't have the things we need,
it's
why the country's not taken care of.
I think it's one of the reasons why we got involved, in the Ukraine situation.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the military-industrial complex wanted this history of provocation of the Russians, for a decade, because it gave them an excuse to keep on spending a lot of money for the military-industrial complex. Okay, now I don't know that the military-industrial complex directly wanted to have the kind of war they got in terms, of Ukraine, because I think there was a miscalculation there. I think since people felt, that Russia was no more than a gas station that owned the country, given that miscalculation, that's what led to the failures we see now
Yes.
that actually threaten the whole administration.
Mm-hmm.
If the Russians should end it quickly now, just going into an election season, it's hard to see how Biden would be able to recover from that. That was certainly not the intention of the Biden administration. It's probably not the intention of the military industrial complex. But it's what has happened. So, we have here very few comments tonight. and we had only
What's going
small
on?
attendance.
Something must be going on elsewhere.
Well, I've generally been very discouraged by the lack of interest in these programs that explore the money facts. And that give the reasons why we should be voting against people who are taking the big money. It seems so obvious to me that that is the only way forward. To answer Steve Wolfrand's question, have you seen Oliver Anthony's song, Richmond North, okay, of Richmond? Yes. Okay, I have seen the song. I didn't really fall in love with it for some reason. I'm not sure exactly why. I have to watch it again and think through why I didn't really fall in love with it. I know there are some people who view the song as somehow an anti-union song. I did not have that initial reaction to it, but I have to listen to it again and see how it strikes me. Okay, so we have Andy Candy here as April Mano, and she comments, so would the Chamber of Commerce have an agenda, or are they just a funneling organization for big pigs? Well, it's been known for many, many years that the Chamber of Commerce actually represents the very large corporations and is not particularly friendly to small business organizations. Doesn't really represent the small business organizations. So, if by big pigs you mean the large corporations, yes, they're just a funneling organization for the large corporations. Okay, they're a projection of the interests of the large corporations. They represent what the really large corporations want. That's been known for a very long time. And they generally spend their money in federal elections to elect Republicans who would represent them as opposed to Democrats. And Andy Kenny says, Facebook jailed me for spam for hashtag dump the corruption over your videos. I shared to groups. I quit them before for the same BS. Thank you, Andy. Thank you for trying to share that. That's one of the reasons why it's difficult to get the project going. If you try to share the hashtag a lot, then you can get into trouble. Andy says, okay, I listen. I just always have my hands full. Yeah, I noticed that, Andy. I realize you do have your hands full. So thank you for everything you do and for all that you can do. Okay, Dee, time to say goodnight.
Yes, thank you for everybody that's been here. Please hit the like button, subscribe, and share.
And please buy us some coffees. Okay, or visit my Patreon account. In my case, I have a Patreon account. And you can contribute through the Patreon account. The coordinates of the Patreon account are right by my name there. and the coordinates of the Buy Me a Coffee account are scrolling across the bottom right now. And Andy says, yes, I wonder if I spell out the hashtag, okay, if that will work. I mean, if you spell it out as, if you put it in as hashtag dump the corruption above, that is actually spelling it out. So if you don't present dump the corruption in that way, would it work? I don't know. It might work better for Facebook if you just use the phrase dump the corruption without a hashtag. I mean, maybe the hashtag is giving you trouble.
Sometimes you have to reword things. I mean, you have to dump corruption together, but you could say something beforehand and then dump the corruption and change that around a bit. Because if they hear the same phrase or the same wording of anything over and over again, they consider it spam.
Yeah, that's probably the problem. Okay, in Facebook. Yeah. Okay, so thanks for coming, everybody. Thanks for staying.
And good night to Bonnie.
And good night. You received the good night from D.
Oh, good night.
Here, Andy Candy says, I wish you had a P.O. box. I'd send you $20 or so. My cards got hacked.
Oh, your cards got hacked. Thank you, Andy. I don't have a PO. I don't have a PO box, but I do have. I have a street address, and I'll be happy to give it to you. Okay, if we follow each other on Facebook, then we can DM things like street addresses. Andy says, night, night, beautiful people. Steve Wolfbrand says, good night. Good night, Steve. And thank you for being here.
Yes, thank you, and we'll see you all tomorrow.
So, everybody, good night. Tomorrow night is a neoliberalism show. I have something in mind, okay, I want to do, but I don't know if I can get the person I want to do it with to come aboard. So we will see about that. But if not, there are always interesting things to say about the influence of neoliberalism in our political system.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, a Buy Me a Coffee only seems to accept $5 donations, but I think you can buy multiple coffees. I'm pretty sure that will work because in the past, in fact, I believe D has bought me 2 or 3 coffees or 4 coffees at once on one occasion. Didn't you, D?
I think I did, yes.
Yeah, I think that was back last December or November sometime.
Okay.
So it is possible to buy more than one coffee. Okay, but thank you for asking, Steve. So, time to say good night.
Yes, good night, everybody.
And once again, and good night, D. I'll see you tomorrow. I'm sure at 8 o'clock. And then I'll be on at 9.